if you're in areas like Sanborn, over towards Sop Choppy, perhaps Curtis Mill, the Oak Park area, that bend through Highway 319 that leads you into Sop Choppy, now's a good time to make sure you find your typical safe place that you shelter in during a storm situation like this, because there has been ongoing evidence that's been kind of cycling back and forth from time to time that we can have a tornado or at least some strong gusty winds being produced within this swath of thunderstorm activity that's beginning to push its way towards Highway 375. And this circulation, this is the signature that we're seeing on the classic radar data that's been crossing just over Highway 67 in the northern edge of Franklin County and maybe clipping sections of Liberty County too. But we're seeing a pickup in the heavy rain action and maybe even some small hail embedded within this shield around Smith Creek Road, close to the Sanborn region, south to Rose Street, and then to the west from there, where this little hook indicates where there can be some rotation that can make contact with the ground as a tornado. That's why the warning has been issued. That circulation is just a couple miles to the south of Sanborn and moving towards the general direction of Wood Lake Road, Rose Street, and Smith Creek Road as you're moving to the north and the west outside of downtown Sop Choppy. So those are going to be the regions where we can see this potential tornadic thunderstorm continuing to make progress to the northeast at about 30 miles per hour. So again, that's why we have a tornado warning, and we're staying on the air with coverage. I do regret if you're enjoying your favorite Wednesday evening show here on ABC, but we do need to track this thunderstorm, which has a history of producing circulation and winds that have been capable of causing a tornado, even one that's been confirmed based on National Weather Service evidence and analysis when it was over the central portions of Franklin County. That tighter circulation being shown in the velocity data, or just the overall motion and behavior of the winds across this region here of Wakulla County. So rather Liberty County, and beginning to cross through the river, the Ocklawakanee River, a couple miles south of Sanborn. So that's going to be the point where we see maybe some potential for gustier winds, at least at the level these are being detected. There can be gusts that can be roughly about 60 to 70 miles per hour, maybe a stronger bit of outflowing or outflowing winds here to the south of Sanborn. We'll use a product that's more relative to where the storm is. So there's definitely some healthy wind circulation within this portion here where there is that warranted concern for a possible tornado. Even if there isn't one directly on the ground right now, there's a good chance that we're seeing some hefty winds that are occurring within the proximity of that tight circulation. And certainly the shield of heavy rain becoming a little more evident across the Highway 375 region. So near Sop Choppy, a little ways to your southwest, that's where we're seeing the storm going. Now, if we're going to continue to track this over the next few minutes, we're going to put a storm track on this to see what other communities within Wakulla County can be in the path of that portion of the thunderstorm. Going off of the velocity, it's moving at about 30 miles per hour. So we'll put a storm track on here, and it lists off here to the left which locations can get in on the possible arrival of that portion of the thunderstorm. So near Sop Choppy within the next 2 minutes. It's kind of hidden by the banner there, but it says 9:24. Oak Park about 9:34. 9:36 for Oak Park near the Medart area north of Wakulla High School. If it continues on this trajectory, it could be around there around 9:45 and maybe coming close to some of the communities and neighborhoods around Crawfordville around 9:50 to 9:55. So there's adequate time for you to make any kind of moves you need to make into a more secure place if you feel that need where you are. And it's definitely advised to consider that possibility when you have a tornado warning, because there has been one that has been in effect for quite a while with this same thunderstorm. It's kind of cycled back and forth with its overall strength, but has been a very consistent indicator of where we have the ongoing trends of maybe some strong gusty winds in a local sense here across what's now beginning to move into the southwestern side of Wakulla County, a few miles to the southwest of Sop Choppy and approaching Rose Street and Wood Lake Road. So those are going to be some of the areas where we may have some of those stronger rates of twisting motion within the thunderstorm. This is our shear marker value that we have exclusively here at First to Know Weather. And there's even some points here based on some of the analysis. If you look at the scale for those visually able. The reds indicate where we have strong circulating winds closer to where the base of the cloud is, and in that little yellow shade there, it does denote at least a little bit of what's being classified based on this analysis as extreme wind shear. So there is at least on this scan a good bit of evidence that there can certainly be enough wind occurring within this scan near Wood Lake and Rose Street and close to the Curtis Mill Road area where there can be the circulation that supports a possible tornado. Let's see what our storm threat hazard level does indicate, and these different colors show the different hazards that can be contained within this thunderstorm. Purple shade showing where there may be some hail, probably some small hail in that little area north of that circulation, and these points of red, that indicates where there can be enough wind based on our Titan radar analysis tools to indicate enough circulating winds of at least 60 miles per hour, or in this case 58, but 58, 60, not much of a difference. The point being there can be enough circulation to support a tornado that can make contact with the ground within this region based on this particular scan of radar data and the analysis it provides. So there is evidence to keep a tornado warning going within this region here of Wakulla County, especially the southwestern side. And that's why we're on the air right now here on ABC 27 and also our digital streams, because we do see a tornado cell that has had a history of producing tornado or tornado-like activity across when it was over portions of Franklin County, now moving into the southwestern corner of Wakulla County. So around the Highway 375 area to the south of Sanborn, and still roughly about 3-4 miles to the west-southwest of Sopchoppy, moving mostly to the northeast. So this will take it mostly over those forested areas, but there are some neighborhoods I know of, and certainly some thoroughfares where there can be impacts when it comes to any kind of wind forces that can be at play within this thunderstorm, and that can be something that causes some, let's say, unwanted effects when it comes to anything that the wind can kind of knock over, push over. There is a possibility for some structural damage. There may even be some power outages that can be caused possibly from the existence of this circulation. And again, it's not one of those thunderstorm cells that just sweeps a couple radar pieces of data and it has a tornado signature and then kind of just backs off and never comes back. This has been one that's been very consistent over the last hour or so as it tracked in from the coast and continues to move into these southwestern Wakulla County communities and areas. Based on the velocity data here, there's still a very tight indication where strong winds coming towards the radar site meet up with nearly as strong winds coming on the backside of this. So that shows the circulation pattern here on the radar data, and that's why that severe thunderstorm is tornado warned, because of this ongoing trend of circulation. So if you're anywhere along Rose Street or Smith Creek Road, close to the west side of Sopchoppy, that's where you need to make sure you are in that interior place where you can be protected from any of the elements that this storm may cause in terms of wind-related effects. So that is a point that we're going to stress to you pretty significantly here. And I stepped off just to do a couple little other analysis tools. One tool that we have is to detect if there's any kind of debris or solid matter that's not moisture or rain, if anything like that has been lifted up. And right now, not seeing any indication of that based on some of our analysis tools. And quickly checking in on some of the information that we do have some of our connections with the National Weather Service. They're the ones that issue the warnings, not me, but nonetheless, we are tracking it with them. They provide various sources of information of what they're seeing. Right now, there's no obvious tornado debris signature or something that would certainly give us that high level of evidence that something has been touching down on the ground here, but just the overall trend of continued patterns that have allowed this thunderstorm to thrive as it has been moving over the forested areas of Franklin County over the last hour or so, tracking in from Apalachicola Bay and continuing to lift its way towards the northeast. It's had a steady and consistent trend of support for gusty winds and maybe enough of that twist in the lower part of the thunderstorm to create a tornadic circulation or a tornado touching down. And then even a weak tornado is something that can give you some big problems, and we don't want folks to go unaware of a situation that can be particularly hazardous, like this one could be for folks who are within the close proximity of this thunderstorm which quite frankly is not giving off much lightning or thunder. There have been those lightning flashes that have been pretty frequent. In fact, let's put that lightning tracker on and see what kind of lightning evidence that we have. There's really not a whole lot that's been going on as of late, but nonetheless, the point being, there has been the wind patterns that have supported this. So if you're around Sop Choppy, the Oak Park, and especially the Rose Street area, not to sound redundant, but this is definitely a point where you should be taking cover in an interior room, away from any windows, hopefully in a secure structure, because if you do have even non-tornadic winds, that can cause adversities due to maybe some of those stronger winds that are coming out of the circulation in the southwestern side of Wakulla County. The velocity values, we keep going back and forth with these values and these data sources because that gives us the evidence and the reason and more of the suspicions that we can have some adverse conditions within this thunderstorm. Here's the latest scan of the wind patterns relative to where the storm is. If you're in downtown Sop Choppy, this is just a couple miles off to your west, right along Rose Street, and this will start to move into the Smith Creek Road area. This wind cycle, this potential tornado could certainly continue to make some headway in the direction of that Smith Creek Road to Oak Park area. So we'll zoom in even more closely for folks who may be within range of this. We do certainly have the possibilities of seeing some rougher weather coming into the scene from Rose Street to Smith Creek up towards Stephen Revel Road and around the Oak Park area to Ashmore. I'd say the eastern extent at this time would be Sean Whaley Road. So if any of those sound familiar to you, that's going to be a pattern where this potential tornadic thunderstorm and the wind patterns that go along with it can move in those general directions. So in the Oak Park area as well, we even zoom in a little more tightly, see if any streets come up there. But if you're familiar with this location here in southwestern Wakulla County, those are going to be areas that have the highest effect potentially from this thunderstorm, as it still has, at least going off the basic radar data that many folks are probably used to seeing, it still has that little hook shape. And sometimes that indicates where the winds are coming around and then an inflow like so that can cause that twist in circulation to keep a tornado active within this region, or at least the high possibility of a tornado active within this area. Still based on what we're seeing on radar data, just stepping off to see what kind of other information comes in from our National Weather Service folks who are also tracking this. This will not necessarily just collapse right where it is beyond the 9:45 expiration time of this thunderstorm. We can see the effects of this thunderstorm continuing to make its push towards the 319 corridor. And on that track, it can make its way closer to, we'll say, the Medart area, around the Mount Pleasant vicinity, and near and south of the Crawfordville area over the next half hour. So that is a possibility where if this portion of the thunderstorm continues to hold itself together, it can make a motion that can make its way towards 319 and closer to some of the communities in between Medart, Wakulla High School, up towards the Crawfordville area, Hudson Park. Those are just some landmarks I can think of, but those can be some locations in the next half hour where we can have some of the storm's effects moving in. And it may not be in the same form as it is now. We're still showing healthy wind values and wind speeds that can support a circulation or a tornado funnel that can be on the ground. And it may not be something that's just steady on the ground for a long time. It may be hopping, skipping if it does have some kind of feature that extends from the base of the cloud. That is certainly a possibility, that you don't have something that's in touch with the ground, but it can stir up the winds just enough to create some issues when it comes to the overall situation of structural damage or power outages or things of that nature. So again, Oak Park to Ashmore, and I'd say even on the northern side of Sop Choppy, I know that's going to be something that comes pretty close to you, but it may just go to the slight north west of you in Sop Choppy. So this circulation may be able to stay to your north when it comes to its proximity to the downtown area, gorgeous downtown with so many new things and many things happening in Sop Choppy. So hopefully this, if there is something that's on the ground here, hopefully it stays out of that vicinity. We don't want it to go anywhere within our communities, quite honestly, but you know, the situation is what it is, and if we do have to track a tornado, it would be better if it stays out of densely populated areas. But nonetheless, for folks who are in the Oak Park to Sop Choppy corridor there along the Sop Choppy River, that's a point where we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 minutes, that's where this thunderstorm is most likely to track, and that's where we can have the hazards of a potential tornado coming into this region over the course of the next few minutes. To recap real quickly, it's 9:33. We are on the air with special coverage of a storm situation here in Wakulla County that has a tornado warning covering the southwestern corner of the county. It's in effect until 9:45. So we'll be on the air tracking this thunderstorm until the expiration of this warning. And this is a thunderstorm that is not your ordinary thunderstorm. It had moved in from the Gulf. It had several cycles of spinning up a lot of low-level circulation. There was a point over the Tates Hill Forest area where it did acquire on radar data the data that is necessary to classify it as a confirmed tornado at that time. It may be lifting back and forth, but it still has a structure to where gusty winds are a high likelihood in this corridor from Sopchoppy, Oak Park, Ashmore, and then going back over some of the forested areas north and west of Highway 319 to where we can maybe see some of this avoiding more densely populated neighborhoods, but can make a closer approach as we go through time after 9:45 to that more populated 319 corridor between Medart and Sopchoppy and the Bloxham cutoff area. So that's something that we'll be monitoring over the course of the next few minutes. And again, if this tornado warning does get canceled or is expired early by chance, we'll definitely get back to your primetime viewing pleasures. But for now, we want to make sure folks who are in the area of this severe thunderstorm, we want you to know about its existence, about the tornado warning, and the immediacy and the danger that a tornado warning is prompting, because that means we can have hazardous weather, life-threatening weather that can occur in a short amount of time across this region. It has been clearing out of the Ochlockonee River area, so we're looking good there. But again, closer to the Sopchoppy River, north of Sopchoppy, and near the Oak Park area, that's where we have the more consistent trends of the circulation within this thunderstorm as it moves mostly to the northeast. It's still kicking right along at about 25, 30 miles per hour, so we still have a good bit of overall time before this circulation makes its way towards 319, but we want to make sure that you know minute to minute what to expect from this thunderstorm. The shear values, based on our exclusive analysis here at Titan Radar and First to Know Weather, it does show at least the indication of ongoing strong rotation. That's a little backing off from what we had a little while ago, but again, the trends have been consistent over the last hour to 30 minutes to 60 minutes, where we've had this ongoing cycle of circulation that's been moving across the Ochlockonee River and now situated in the Oak Park area. So the trends do show that we still have high enough wind gusts, and the pattern still supports the possibility to have a tornado in the vicinity of Oak Park and near Ashmore. So along Stephen Revel Road, and that thoroughfare that goes through Oak Park, not showing a road label for right now, but on the eastern side of this, where we have Sean Whaley Road, it looks like we have a reconfiguration of this tornado warning. It looks like a new warning. And a new feature that we have here at First to Know Weather, when there is a warning that has a confirmed tornado, whether it's by radar or other sighting, the tornado warning itself will show up in a purple shade. So that's what we see right now that's popped up here in Wakulla County. And this has been a warning that is now issued, kind of replacing the previous one. The warning is in effect until 10:15, but this is because of likely radar data, and I'll step off to confirm this. Radar data that has been able to support the overall classification of this warning as being for a tornado that has been confirmed. This is a tornadic thunderstorm that is being shown by observation. Just reading off some of the data on this computer. So this is an ongoing, increasingly critical situation here for folks in Wakulla County. A tornado-producing storm that is 11 miles to the southwest of Crawfordville, moving northeast at 30 miles per hour. Radar confirmed, as I was indicating, this has been based on some of the radar data that has been analyzed through our various systems, and the National Weather Service sees very much the same things. There's been consistent rotation with this, so this is one that is being classified as confirmed and observed based on radar data. So this has been a system that is continuing to make its path, putting its way through the Oak Park community. And as we go forward into time, in fact, we have the Crawfordville area being shown on our mapping system here. And as mentioned, it was about 11 miles to the southwest, that circulation near the Oak Park area and Stephen Revel Road. This will likely make a path, considering its current forward movement, closer to the western outskirts of Crawfordville, the Aaron area, perhaps within the next 20 minutes or so, if it continues on this present course. So that flashing purple area is essentially the replacement tornado warning for Wakulla County, and includes a broader swath of the central part of the county right up to the county line, and it's in effect until 10:15. So that is the portion of storminess that we're tracking, and it's going to start to move maybe a little closer to some of those population areas within Wakulla County. So that means there's a little more urgency for folks to take this seriously. This has been a tornado warning based on data that has confirmed that a tornado had been in contact with the ground and causing perhaps some debris to be lifted up over those forested areas. Stepping off just to analyze some of the debris tracking modes that we have here. It's based in a little bit of extra noise within the radar data itself. So it's not clear cut that there's something actually picked up off the ground and flying around, but if there is a circulation and this classic hook shape and the overall data, just layers and layers and layers and layers of evidence that's showing that we have a strong enough circulation within this boundary, there is a high likelihood that a lot of this is going to be verified by visual observation eventually. So this is not something to just say, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, nothing's happening, I'm going to bed. Don't take that attitude if you're within Wakulla County. I don't really do a lot of hype or jokes when it comes to severe weather. I'm not that type of meteorologist. I give it to you straightforward, and this is a straightforward observation that there is a likelihood to have at least a very strong wind event, if not a tornado event, that can make its approach over the next few minutes into the 319 corridor between Medart and Crawfordville. So if you are within that route, that corridor there, it's time to take cover and make sure you're in the place that you need to be in before this particular thunderstorm makes its way into your region. So there's that classic radar that we are going to put up right here. A shield of heavier rain that extends to the north of the Oak Park area and over towards the Wakulla-Aaron Road. That's where the rain is going to be. There can be some small hail to the south of that, and that circulation near Oak Park, that is what we are seeing in terms of the possible circulation of what this likely tornadic thunderstorm is producing. So, with that said, and considering that it's still making a move towards the northeast, we'll put another storm track on this and kind of highlight a few more of those communities that can be in the path of this. And what we're going to do is show you some estimated times of arrival for that portion of the thunderstorm, considering that it's moving to the northeast at about 30 miles per hour. So we'll put that there. Pardon me, to the left is where we have some of the arrival times, estimated arrival times. And if you're visually able, you can see that maybe around Crawfordville, this particular portion of the thunderstorm will get to you before the top of the hour. Around Hilliardville, that's on, say, New Light Church Road and Spring Hill Road, that kind of intersection there. It'll be about 10 o'clock. If it continues on this sort of path. It's not going to go in a straight line necessarily. It can deviate a little bit, so that's why there's a little cone of where it can possibly go. So these are not precisely where this thunderstorm is going to necessarily hit, but these can be some of the communities such as Wakulla Springs or a little after 10 o'clock and close to Spring Hill about 10:12. Approximate times of arrival for the closest approach of that portion of the thunderstorm, and that can give some communities and some towns and some cities some issues, to say the least, when it comes to where this possible tornado can track. So folks in the newsroom, you might want to make some calls to see if there's been any kind of confirmations of any kind of actual debris or sightings or any phone calls that folks have been making. But hopefully this is going to be something that kind of lifts up and not causes a big portion of the region to have a big issue when it comes to wind damage. But that possibility just cannot be disregarded, not by any means, because of the ongoing situation. And even if it's not something that's on the ground, you don't have to have a tornado. You don't have to have winds of 60 miles per hour to cause some damage to some things. Trees can be toppled over in winds of a much lesser extent. you can experience power outages. And some of those can certainly disrupt the ability to move around on this late night. So there is plenty of reason to take this seriously, even though it may cycle through. I wouldn't necessarily hold a bunch of skepticism about, oh, this is not going to do anything, because it has a history, and the data has been very consistent as far as where it's been moving and what it's been doing in terms of its overall ability to kick up those winds. And it comes back and forth from time to time in terms of the tightness of the circulation, the intensity of the wind speeds. So it does tend to vary from point to point and from time to time. But the overall trends have been showing that the wind gust effects around this region have been very steady to produce maybe some low-end tornadic effects. Wind speeds could be around 60, 70 miles per hour, and this may be about 1,000 feet off the ground level, so there may be at least some slight difference between what our radar is showing and what you may be experiencing at ground level. But hopefully it's not going to be something where you're kind of looking out the window trying to see what's going on. Our base velocity product does tend to show pretty much the similar wind speed patterns of about maybe 65 to 70 miles per hour. There's the latest scan that just came in from the overall radar that scans the sky every couple of minutes to give us the freshest data. So this is near real time, and this is approaching areas that are still west of Highway 319, but not far from Lawton Mill Road and the Aaron area to the southwest. Crawfordville, right up and down Crawfordville Highway, Hudson Park, and some of the commerce areas that are within the downtown center there. That's where we're seeing maybe about 2-3 miles of a distance from this particular circulation to where Crawfordville is. So this circulation, this little zone of winds, will likely start to head in your direction pretty soon. The shear rates continue to show at least some strong low-level circulations that can support a tornado being possibly on the ground here. And our overall storm threats, based on our exclusive analysis technology, still on an earlier scan had a little spot there of that circulation close to Oak Park. That's likely been mostly displaced to the north based on the latest scans that have just come in. So our analysis threat tracker is likely going to update in the next few seconds and show maybe a little more of a carry forward of that action closer to the 319 area. There's the latest scan. It kind of drops that little spot that had the rotation in it. Small to moderate hail is certainly a possibility there, along with the downpours and perhaps those ongoing wind gusts. Latest scan showing maybe a lesser of a hook feature there. So that can be an indication of, again, maybe another little cycle around of some of the action there located within the central portions of Wakulla County. And again, this is probably over more of a kind of slightly or more scattered population compared to the population centers around the Crawfordville area and to the north there. But this will still be a storm that will track in your general direction of Highway 319 over the next few minutes. And that is a possibility that we can see some rough conditions that can move across the Highway 319 corridor over the course of the next couple of minutes. So continue to heed the warning, continue to take this seriously here in central Wakulla County, where we do have this ongoing tornado warning that's in effect until 10:15. And that's why we're on the air. That's why we're interrupting your typical programming tonight, because we had been letting you know over the past few days that we can have some active weather coming our way, mainly in the form of a long line of storms that can push through the area during the overnight period. And that's still expected. This is not going to be the main event, if you will, when it comes to severe weather. There's going to be another line that comes into the region from the west during the early morning hours. These have been individual cells that have kind of worked in with a destabilizing atmosphere. Not to get too technical, but we've seen a little inflow, a big inflow of warm, moist air across the Forgotten Coast, and that has led and influenced some of these storms to form and carry into the central portions of the Big Bend by a very steady south and southeast wind. So we have stronger winds, we have winds of different directions in different zones, and that's helped to cause some of these individual cells to kind of thrive as they've moved to the northeast, and that's why we've seen, at least in some cases, these individual cells tracking and producing circulations and possible tornadoes. So that's this trend that we're having. These are individualized thunderstorms. The main source of storminess is still off towards the west by quite a bit, and that's going to be a trend that we'll be facing later tonight. Just a quick little shift of the rain and storms across the Panhandle region with some warnings of their own across that area close into, we'll say, Walton County. That's the action that will be arriving in our western areas by around 11, 12 o'clock, and that's what's going to give us maybe a little more of the broader extent of some of the action in terms of severe weather potential that we may be facing across our area in a much more broad sense. But those individual thunderstorms that we're facing right now in central Wakulla County, that's the point where we have the highest likelihood of active storms. That's going to give us some concerns for maybe some tornadic abilities over the next few minutes. And again, that tornado warning continues until 10:15 for this central zone of Wakulla County. Maybe a little less of an identification with the overall circulation. There's still some gustier winds, maybe a little broadening out of the circulation itself, but near Lawhons Mill and south of Aaron and approaching Highway 319, that is a zone where the winds are likely going to be picking up some, and that can cause some disruptions with power and maybe some trees of their own. So you're going to start getting in on gustier winds around the Crawfordville area, and that secondary source of wind data shows kind of the opposing overall flow, kind of spread out a little bit more. But nonetheless, I would certainly expect that we do have some wind gusts that are picking up by quite a bit, and maybe in a broader sense, there can be some circulation in the lower part of the cloud that can kind of cause some issues, maybe cause some concern. Don't necessarily go out if you're in Crawfordville and try to see what's going on. That's not advised, because even if this is in a slightly weakening cycle, there's still going to be some rough weather that you're going to go through over the next 5 to 10 minutes as this area of storminess continues to make its move to the northeast, kind of spreading itself out. Not the clear hook that we had just about 5-10 minutes ago. So maybe a little more in the way of gustier winds and maybe a lesser extent of tornado winds based on our analysis. But we do see quite a bit of action with the overall aspects of heavy rain, occasional lightning and thunder. It's not very lightning or thunder productive, but we do have at least some of the elements of heavier rain. You can maybe get a little bit of hail across this, and the latest check of our storm threat mode across this central Wakulla County region showing that we can have some small hail and maybe some lower end wind gusts that can be maybe not so supportive of an actual tornado on the ground. But again, sometimes these systems kind of come and go with their abilities. They can kind of back off of their strength a little bit and try to reacquire some strength. I do suspect, though, as this continues to move to the northeast, it will start to move into what's not quite as an unstable setup across Leon County as it has been across the coastal areas of Wakulla County. And it looks like there's been another reconfiguration of that warning. Looks like we'll see the data coming in. That red shading showing just a general tornado warning, and I don't want to say just, but maybe a step below the confirmed level, which is where that pink shade or that purple shade is. That's when the signatures on the radar were strong enough and evident enough to show that there was a tornado earlier with this circulation. Now maybe backing off of that confirmed titling and maybe just being a concern for one that can start to pop or maybe redevelop from this portion as it moves into the Crawfordville area proper. With those stronger winds, with the shear that tends to be decreasing, at least when it comes to the Crawfordville area proper, maybe not so much of that tightening shear as what we had earlier in this storm tracking mode, but definitely some gustier winds, some inconveniences to say the least, and likely to get in on particularly unsettling weather over the next few minutes. So I'm not seeing a clear-cut point where we do have a circulation or a signature that kind of identifies clearly where a tornado can be. There is quite a bit of scattering and noise and pollution, I guess you can say, when it comes to the radar data itself. It's not clear-cut like it was at earlier times across Franklin County or even earlier in southwestern Wakulla. But you're about to get in on the peak of the storm action when it comes to the possibilities, the high likelihood of gustier winds within Crawfordville itself, you may not have a whole lot of rain to come with that, except for maybe on the northern edge, but we can have maybe some of the inflowing winds that are kind of picking up the wind gusts a little bit, and maybe that can roughen things up a little bit, even if you do not have an actual circulation that's on the ground. With a signature like this, it looks a little less likely that something would be in touch with the ground, and I think that's why we're kind of backing off of the confirmed labeling that was with the earlier tornado warning, and now with that red shade there, I'm just going to step off just to get my bearings straight on the reconfiguration of the new warning. The red shaded box there is just the general tornado warning for something that can develop, so that essentially replaces that confirmed wording, but nonetheless, if you're in the path of this along Highway 319, you should certainly still take cover, even though the intensity of the thunderstorm may have decreased a bit, and the confidence of something that's actually on the ground has lowered a bit based on what we're seeing here. There is still a possibility to have hazardous gusty winds coming along with this system, and perhaps even a little bit of interference from this other system that's off to the west that's been passing just to the southeast of Smith Creek. Maybe that existence can kind of interfere with the overall circulation efforts and the overall wind patterns with these two individual thunderstorms. So there can be at least a little bit of tweaking with the structure of this, and maybe a little decrease in its ability to sustain a tornado on the ground within Wakulla County in the 319 corridor. But there's still valid reasons to take the storm seriously and make sure you maintain a certain level of awareness and alertness, because the thunderstorm definitely spreading the heavier rain across the northern stretch of the Crawfordville community, I'd say near and north of the Songbird area, the Ivan vicinity where the Walmart is. That's where we have the heavier rain. You have to kind of go to the west and then southwest of that to get in on more intense rain. Near the Aaron vicinity, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Senior Center is within that general vicinity there. So that's going to be a zone where we have heavier rain, and maybe the gustier winds are just to the south of that. So we can still have, again, the overall squally conditions, perhaps maybe without an actual tornado touchdown within this area as it stands at this point. The wind gusts are still kind of shearing themselves out, if you will, where it's becoming less identifiable to see the actual circulation of a tornado, but I do think just the leftovers of the wind forces, the dynamics, the changeability of the atmosphere that a storm cell like this could create, that's still giving concern for the possibility of maybe some pockets of wind-related effects, perhaps a little bit of storm damage that can result from this. And, you know, we don't necessarily have, at least I don't have eyes and ears right there right now, but let's continue to monitor this very closely. I'm going to change our our graphic tools just for a moment, so you may see at least a little bit of a changeability in the appearance of things, just to kind of give an idea of if we have any power outages around the area. And right now we're not seeing power outages in Wakulla County. That's something that's good to see. Perhaps so maybe some of this can actually, that's from earlier today. There's the latest map right there, and still no power outages around our area. So that's definitely a good sign that you know, maybe these are beginning to have maybe a minimal effect just because of where they've been over more of the forested areas. So we do have, at least on that tool, that we don't have any major power outages that exceed 100 customers quite yet. But nonetheless, there's still that possibility where you can maybe lose power for a brief amount of time as we go into the next few minutes. Current time is 9:56. Our tornado warning is in effect until 10:15. It does cover Wakulla County, and it's to the west of Crawfordville. So that's why we're in the midst of storm tracking coverage here at First to Know Weather, to make sure folks who are within the proximity of this thunderstorm, and maybe some folks that are concerned about folks who may be within the proximity of the storm, can know what's going on minute by minute, so they can know how to respond to this in the way they need to. This is a decreasing situation compared to about 15 minutes ago, when there was a lot more evidence and a lot more indication of the strength of this thunderstorm that can create at least a sustained tornado trend. Maybe not so sustained anymore, but there's still going to be, you know, storms like this don't just collapse and go away over 5 minutes. There's still going to be the outflow of heavy rain. There still may be some hail in a smaller size, and still some gustier winds in general around the Crawfordville area. but our overall analysis tools are having a hard-pressed time finding any kind of precise spot where circulation is still intact. There's still at least these few zones where we do have at least a broad circulation around the Aaron Road area and just to the west of Crawfordville Highway. So there's a pretty good amount of belief that we can have winds picking up within this zone, maybe heading towards the Spring Creek Highway, Highway 61, along and north of Shadeville Road as well, and approaching Wakulla Springs. But that is just to describe the sense of gustier winds that may be contained within this, and very tough to spot any kind of concentrated circulation. In fact, the latest shear markers are continuing to go back into the weak category based on our shear ratings here, exclusive at First to Know Weather. So we're seeing at least a dwindling trend in the tightness of wind circulation close to Crawfordville and the Ivan community. But we have to monitor this other storm that's off to the west. And just in the last analysis scan, that has kind of decreased in its overall form and ability to cause circulation. No warning for that. It does have a little stretched out hook shape to it, but nonetheless, that is a point of interest that we'll also continue to track over the next few minutes because of the presence of these storms and the history of them that have been able to create some occasional tornadic concerns in the vicinity of Franklin County earlier, and now situated on the central side of Wakulla County. So there still will be some occasions around Crawfordville and Ivan over towards the Aaron Road area where you will still have some not so great weather. And if you're listening to this from a television in another room or you have us streaming on your device, it's a good idea to just stay put where you are until the warning is lifted, which is set to expire at 10:15. And despite the wording of that banner, it has been downgraded from its earlier confirmed labeling to a general tornado warning where, based on what we're seeing with the radar scans, one can possibly redevelop within the central portions of Wakulla County. But again, last 3 to 5 minutes, it's been very difficult to find any kind of tight enough circulation to say, yes, there's definitely something at point X. We're not quite there at that point. There's still at least a broadening lower amount of circulation within this, and I think that could be a factor in keeping that warning going because we can see maybe less in the way of potent, strong winds in particular, but there still may be at least a couple zones where there is enough wind flow to keep things kind of gusty and squally around the Crawfordville area proper. And if there is any kind of circulation, again, very tough to identify based on this, but it still looks like it's lingering kind of just to the west of 319 and just southwest of Aaron. So Stokely Road is to the north there. If there's anything that's kind of circulating, whether it's a kind of a low base twist in the cloud or it's just some general wind gusts or some heavy rain that's coming, it's likely within this region here, north of Wakulla, Aaron, north of that McDonald's, Winn-Dixie there, north of there towards Ivan Church Road is one location that can also have some of those stronger wind gusts as well, and that's going to make things kind of a little rough around Strickland Road, it looks like. So that's going to be the zone where, based on what we're seeing on our radar analysis tools, that's where the strongest winds are present based on this perspective, and there is a possibility that you may be away from this and still experiencing some not so great weather conditions. And if that's the case, definitely make sure you're staying put for the time being. I appreciate your patience if you're not in Wakulla County and you're watching this storm coverage, because we do have a tornado warning that remains in effect for about another 14 minutes here in Wakulla County, and until it's canceled or until it expires, we're going to stay on to track this for the folks who are within the zone of particular concern with the existence of our tornado warning here near the 319 corridor close to the Crawfordville area. If anything, there's actually been a little bit of a slowdown in the overall progress of that circulation of the overall thunderstorm itself, not really racing off towards the northeast like it was earlier. So a little slower motion there, and it does tend to believe that we can see a little extra lingering rain for some areas. But we are definitely looking into any kind of side effects that this storm has caused, or if anything is happening over the last few minutes as we've been tracking this. If you are still experiencing some storm conditions, heavy rain, definitely don't try to go out and survey what's going on. There's still going to be some times of heavy rain around the Bloxham Cutoff and around, I'd say, the northern extent of New Light Church Road. That's going to be a zone